Hello there, General. So, yesterday I saw the last part of the quite marvelous, pretty debate between the quote unquote nationalist Ricky Dolan, I think he was called, civnat, and I say quote unquote nationalist because when you look at what the guy was actually saying, even this part that I caught, you look at what he's saying, doesn't sound very nationalistic or patriotic or anything like that to me. So it's more like GDP, GDP nationalism. That's more like it. My economics nationalism. Uh, on the other side, you had Laura Toller of the only party in Britain which probably is still, you can call actually nationalistic. And well, what do you have in a debate? Well, very simple. So, Mr. Rikki, what did Mr. Rikki do? Well, Mr. Rikki used every single lefty argument in the book. So what did he do? Well, the first thing he did was, I'm not sure to be honest if it's the lefty um, playbook or it's the other people or specific people playbook. But first thing he did, well, I don't know if it's the first thing, but the first thing I saw him do was harp on about, but Marx has some edgy things in front of this freaking deceitful guy, but it was a Jew. Um, deceitful because the guy was saying that he wasn't recording, but he was actually recording. So he was trying to trap. 20 years ago, this guy, I don't know, filming for a documentary or something, you know. So Mark Collette went with this guy, and uh, you know, he was being pretty deceitful because he was saying that he wasn't recording, but he was recording. That's very deceitful. It's like lying. And Mark said some spicy things when he wasn't. He didn't realize he was being recorded. So that's like 20 years ago, right? And our Ricky is bringing this up and saying, well, he sympathizes with those bad people. That's pretty much what the Ricky argument was. Well, you guys sympathize with these bad people, you know. So the sort of association game, and then also talking about oh no, the Holocaust. You guys were the cost of the Holocaust, So much of the arguments was that, well, if you can even call them arguments, more like fallacies. This idea of, well, I mean, if you follow this logic true, you cannot be a real nationalist because Nazis. If you want to prevent your people from getting steadily whittled down until they're go to oblivion, well, you can't do that because Nazis. You can't fight to keep your people afloat because you know effectively because there was a particular strain of nationalists who also tried to keep the people afloat and they lost and they got crushed and they did bad things in the meantime. So now no European group is allowed to try to keep its own people afloat. No European group is allowed to, push for their own interests. Now they must all now they must all bow down to Saint GDP. That's all they can fight for. The only kind of nationalism is GDP nationalism, where we look at, well, these illegals are hurting our GDP. If you can just legally, Ricky's planet, just if we just legally, like, uh, you know, you just have legal immigration. You can have legal, getting weeded out effectively. Then it's just fine. It's just fine. And of course, you also have to argue that the other argument that he made was the argument of, well, what is British? What is British? Now, of course, that's stupid, right? And the funny part was that he asked Ronald Toller, hey, can you show us your DNA test? And she's like, well, I have my DNA test on the YouTube channel. So like, and she's 100% Northwest European, So um, that gotcha. Oh yeah, can you show your DNA test? Well, it turns out that she does have a DNA test up. So yeah, not a gotcha, boy, not a gotcha at all. And yeah, guess what? There is a genetic basis to, British. There's a genetic basis to that. Not just British is not just anything. Get there and pretend that, well, if people just come to the country and improve the GDP, they can call themselves British. That's pretty much what it boils down to, right? If you just raise the GDP of Britain, then they are British. Again, this is GDP nationalism. And the thing is that if that's the definition, if that's what British is, if you can just come to the magic soil of Britain and the contributor or whatever the hell you call it increases GDP, you're British. What what meaning does British even have then? I mean, it becomes a meaningless term because if anybody at all can so easily slip in under this identity, what does it mean? What does it mean at all? Is it really an identity at all? I mean, at that point, it just becomes a label. British. It becomes a label. That's what it does. You downgrade it from an actual identity to just a label, right? So the label being, like less strong, apparently. I can put a label on everyone, on anyone, just like that, and I can just change, just like that. Identity is much more difficult to change, but labels, yeah, I can just shift. And so this guy, people are saying, well, yeah, good for GDP. It's good for GDP, and I don't want to be a really really bad kind of nationalist. So I'm going to be you know, I'm going to pretend that British people don't actually exist. Now, it's not arguing that anyone can be British. I don't mean that British people don't exist, but that it can be British. It's like if you think that anybody can be British, then you are pretty much saying that it doesn't really exist. You're saying that it's just this label that you can put on. But as it turns out, the British still exist. The British still have a genetic basis, and the idea, and this idea that the British should be any group and all, is effectively going to justify, you know, the complete, the effectively the as Law Tower just said, the white British becoming a minority, or the actual British people becoming a minority in their own country. It justifies this because what it says is, well, anybody can be British. So technically, you're not being turned into the minority in your own country because technically, those other people that are coming in are also quote unquote British. So that's a very very neat trick that they play, which is stupid. And yeah, Rothar there was an argument which said, so if I identify myself as Chinese, I will be Chinese according to this stupid logic. And then a complete and utter ding dong said, well, then go back to China. As if that works. Now, that's not how identity works at all. The Chinese, the Chinese are not like Rikki, like that fool. The Chinese understand how identity works, and understand that no, somebody cannot just call them Chinese and they become Chinese. That's not how it works. They recognize this and they act accordingly. If someone's claiming to be Chinese, they're not gonna, but they see that they're not Chinese because that's not how identity works. That's why they wouldn't accept them. And this idea that I can just unilaterally call myself Chinese and they'll just accept me, it's stupid. Now, if nobody, and here's the thing, if nobody is, I mean, who the hell is gonna even water down the identity to the point where anyone can just march in? You know, who's gonna do that? I mean, who gets hurt? You're just hurting your own group if you do that. You're opening yourself up. You're making your group very vulnerable to getting swamped. No group with any even bit of sanity in their hearts or minds is going to do that. No group is going to open themselves up to getting effectively weirded out. But that's what this fool is advising, the British, the actual British, to do. Yeah, just open yourself up for the sake of GDP to get utterly swamped. Another thing is that the guy pretends that somehow limiting illegal immigration is going to prevent the swamping. It doesn't. I mean, it's a distraction at this point because the vast majority of actual, people who swamp into the country aren't even really illegal. The illegal problem isn't even really that big. It's actually the legal component which is really big. So yeah, but I guess it's easier to measure how much GDP legal migrants produce than illegal. So that's why the GDP nationalist is concerned about that. And of course, the GDP nationalist wants to pretend to be a nationalist, so it's gonna have to harp about immigration, but it's not gonna harp about what actually matters. It's gonna do a distraction. It's gonna distract you with, but illegal, but keeping the actual thing there. What a pesky thing. And through the whole debate, it's this guy constantly brings up but. What this guy's saying exactly is, well, look, some Germans who were nationalists, just European, um, did their thing. So now, there can't be no actual nationalist Europeans because there were this group of national Europeans who did bad things. So now nobody else can be. Now I don't think he has anything wrong with, let's say, Israel, right? Yeah, no problem with those that nationalists, but any European nationalist movement will be a problem. They have any European nationalists. Whites are completely and utterly, uh, you know, what I say, disqualified in his mind to have any true nationalist feelings or movements. They must all bow down. They must pay the price for what happened, what the Germans did all those years ago by, you know, effectively bowing themselves down to GDP and allowing themselves to get, again, weeded out. So, yeah. Um, the fact is that this fool will probably, if you had to choose between being called a Nazi and going extinct, he would rather go extinct. You know? He would rather disappear from reality than be called a Nazi. So, yeah, that's a type of weakness. This type of lack on the will to live. The will to really strive, which is just pathetic. Really pathetic. Again, the whole thing is he's scared of being called a racist, of being called Nazi. That's all it is. Besides the fact that he's a liberal and a leftist anyway. I mean, the way he argues, just he's a leftist. That's all it is. The way he argues, he's not right wing. He's left wing. Um, I don't care if it's economics, maybe more right wing, whatever the hell. I don't care. Socially, at least, he's really socially he's extremely left wing. So that is, what was, and he got stumped. I mean, nobody's this thing about the days in which people were gonna fall for the you're Nazi thing is over. It's gone. Nobody gives a damn about that anymore. People are tired of hearing that crap. People are tired of hearing that Euros cannot actually fight for their own interests because some Germans, man, they were little bad boys and did something. A very ironic thing as well was that she's argued, well, the whole of the war, uh, you know, you could say that the whole of the war, a particular group of people had a big, you can say, contribution to make to that, right? And the guy said, that's the anti, for that people, slur, And the irony is this: so if you even hint that those people had something to do with the Holodomor, it's a slur. But if you try to go and say that all Europeans are not allowed to have nationalist parties because one European group there's some baddie things, well, that's not a slur at all. That's an anti-white narrative. That's not an anti-white slur. To try to, in a way, kind of do this collective blame or this collective punishment on all of the Europeans for this particular event. That's what they're doing. It's collective punishment. All Europeans are now, all Europeans must now just allow themselves to get weeded out because of this thing. Like that is such a ridiculous standard, but nonetheless, that is how it is indeed put out. But you know, the big went very well, very well. I mean, the Rikki guy, he got stumped. He didn't have any arguments. Everyone could see that he didn't have any arguments. I mean, you can't. Again, I don't understand. Like the audience, look at the audience in the chat. Everyone thinks that she won. Why? Because look at the audience. Nobody's gonna fall for that. You know, because the fact is that many of the people in the audience themselves were called Nazis because they don't want their people to get whooshed That's what's going on. Many of these same people, many of these people had to deal with people like Rikki. Okay, that's just a fact. So when they see another Rikki, they see this guy doing the same thing to her. What do you think they're gonna agree? They're gonna side with him? Of course not. The only ones who are approving of this is his little masters. Only people like this are the people who are paying for him, are paying for him to be shilling around. He's a shill. He's a shill. Right? He larps as a nationalist of some sort, but he's not in any way a nationalist. Again, I mean, if you go as far as to say what is British, you're just like, here's the thing: if you don't know what British is, then you have no place to be in this issue. What is British? It's like, seriously, that's one of the most basic things you should know. What it means to be British. And if you don't know this, then just go away, back off. You don't know anything about what's actually being talked about. Yeah. But the fact is, they probably don't know what British is. They probably, because they say, oh, yeah, they say, well, British is not only for white people. It's like, British people are white. That's how it is. And if British is gonna be for British, it's gonna be for white. That's just how it is. Now, you may not like that because you're anti-white, but that's just how it is. I mean, if you want to have actually a Britain for British, then that's how it's gonna be. If, however, you don't want that, I can just say that then, I guess. Well, he did say it, right? He said, no, I don't want only the actual British to be there. I want everyone. He wants everyone in the world to be in Britain. Only if they do it legally and they improve the GDP, then okay, then anyone can be in Britain. Anyone can buy their way into British identity if they just contribute to the GDP. That's what he's saying, right? The British identity is sale. For a few GDP points, you can buy the British identity. How does that sound? Doesn't that sound beautiful? How your identity is for sale by this, you're getting sold by these ding dongs, these shills. But that's what we have. Right? Now, I think at the peak of the debate, 1.6 thousand people watched. So 1.6 thousand people saw this moron expose himself as a shell, complete utter shell. So that's lovely. Now everyone's gonna know this guy's a shell. You know, nobody's gonna take this guy seriously anymore. Especially not after going with, oh, what's British. Especially not after that. So yeah, very nice, very cute. Um, it's really sad situations. Really sad situation we're in, yeah? Where so much of the British quote unquote right wing is just shills. They're just left wing shills who pretend to be right wing, like this guy. The GDP. The only thing the right wing on is GDP. Well, we want more GDP. We want more. Uh, we want big business to be able to get more of those juicy workers, and so improve GDP. That's pretty much the only thing quote unquote right wing about them. Besides that, however, what's conservative about it? Come on, you know. I would say that when you have the debates, one stipulation, if you're debating these guys, one stipulation we'll have is you're not allowed to mention those bad guys, the Nazis. You're not allowed to mention them. And I will put that rule just so that they can't derail the discussion with that crap. It's like, no, you don't get to derail the discussion by harping about Nazis, but Nazis. You don't get to derail it with that. But the thing is that they probably will not accept because they'll knock out 90% of their arguments. 90% of the argument is Nazis. So if you were to put a rule and said, no, you're not allowed to say that, you're not allowed to use that crap because we're tired of it and we don't want to hear your whining, then yeah, they probably wouldn't accept it. But that's it. If they accept it, then what are you gonna say? I don't think they would have anything to really say. Because again, what's the argument? Nothing is the argument. The whole thing, the whole argument is, but you're associated with these bad people, therefore, yeah, you're bad. Association games. Now, Laura Toller they try to use, I think associating with some, what did I say again, some black groups, black supremacist groups. Be like, you think being like, well, your thoughts, the way that you're thinking is very similar to these groups, these leftist groups, which is true. The thinking is indeed very similar to these groups, very similar. Yeah, very similar. Now, there's the last thing though. But on the other hand, okay, so he is very similar to, you know, it's very similar to the leftist, this Rikki guy. But it's on the other side really similar to old Mama Nazis in the first place. Well, the thing is that the property that the Nazis have was that they think that what they thought was the Germans actually had a genetic component to them, and a blood type component to them. And they thought that the best thing was to safeguard this by utilizing the state to, enforce the, I suppose you can say, the well-being of these people, of their people. Now, so their goal was to ensure the well-being of the people and the advancement of the people. Now, the thing is though that when they actually went to, let's say, accomplish these goals, they did some stuff that everyone says horrible. All right. However, that doesn't make the goals wrong, which is what this Rikki moron doesn't understand. Sure, let's say if you were to concede the argument that there's a bit of, there's one similarity, which is that the goals kind of similar, and the question is the methods. The question really is the methods. What methods will be used to accomplish this goal? Because the goal itself, nothing wrong with it. Trying to safeguard your own people. I mean, the Jews in Israel do it. So isn't really anything wrong with its goal. What really matters then is the method. I mean, what we're saying is that if Group X does horrible things while following this particular goal, then clearly the goal is completely wrong. You can throw it away and all that. No, you have to first show that the goal itself is actually wrong, and then you can go. But the guy is so lazy that he tries to effectively go and say, well, these people that had a goal and they did bad things, therefore you're going to do bad things because you have the same goal. This is kind of the argument. A lot of scaremongering, really. I mean, why did they even use this event in the first place to, in these debates? Well, simple. It's because they want to scaremonger people. And there's nothing scarier than this, so they use it. To the generals out there, I would say, do not fall for this crap. Do not fall for this nonsense. Do not allow them to beat you with leftist, leftist really, you can say, framing. And that's a leftist framing. It's a leftist framing. The whole thing, the whole way the guy set it up was leftist framing. Of, effectively, you have to be as far away from the Nazis as possible. This used to be much of the strain of thought is, they are the worst. The Nazis is the worst evil. So being the complete opposites, how further away you are from them, how better you are. That seems to be the idea. But what it leads you to is that if they want to safeguard their people, then not caring about your people getting weeded out is the good thing. And so you get into a whole bunch of utterly absurd conclusions if you try to play this game of, oh well, we want to be the complete opposite, we want to be as far away as possible from those scary people. Awesome. And then you end up being worse than those scary people. Because you know what? Those scary people, scary people, maybe they really damaged a particular group of people in their goal to safeguard their own. But then you end up as someone who's damaged your own group of people massively in order to safeguard everyone else's interest. Which not only are you hurting or you're damaging a group, in this case your group, but that also adds a element of betrayal. You're betraying your own group to others. So you're not only hurting a group, you're not only aiding and abetting in the G word, but you're also being a traitor at the same time. That is, that's what this Rikki guy is. He's abetting in what the actual British getting weeded out, and in their own country, by the way, and he he's supposed to be a white British, right? So he's betraying other people. Okay? Imagine, yeah, if you look going back to Israel, you look at Israel. There are certain liberal, Israelis who try to argue that we should open the borders and we should all this liberal crap. And the nationalist ones, the nationalist, the Zionist types, call them pretty much they call them traitors. They call them, you're trying to, you're siding with our, um, enemies, family. That is the mentality that's over there, and a very similar mentality should come to Europe. The mentality of no, you don't get to side with people who are who are a threat to our existence in our own country, or threat to our really our you could say us even our ownership of the country in the first place, our dominion over our own country. They're a threat to this. Bring them into you know GDP, yeah, GDP and bad people, GDP and bad people, betraying your own people because you don't want to you don't want to be according to the leftist framework be a bad person. Pitiful, pitiful, pitiful. But anyway, General, that's all we have, and hopefully, hopefully, you know, I wish it was more the basic this because every time one of these fools those are debate, they expose themselves further and further. So this will be very much useful, very, very, very much useful. You know, yeah. Anyway, that's all, and see you.